Pastor Michael Fredericks, the pastor here at the Perth-Andover Baptist Church, and I want to share, as quickly as I can here, a presentation that I've shared a couple times publicly in some different venues, but there's a lot of people who haven't seen this yet and don't know this information yet, and I thought it might be helpful to share this online so folks can be informed as to what our, sort of the rationale is behind our refugee project here in Perth-Andover, and what we're actually planning to do. So before I get into what we want to do, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening in Syria right now. So in and around 2011, the Arab Spring was happening all over the Middle East, and dictators were falling left and right. And in Syria, the people rose up to try to defeat Bashar al-Assad's government, and instead of giving in to the will of the people, instead he dug in his heels, and thus began a full-scale civil war in Syria. And so it's been going on since 2011. Like, we're looking at, going on 5 years that this has been happening. So it's not a new phenomenon. But what's been happening is ISIS started to gain momentum, and they've compounded the situation there. So there was already the civil war going on, and then ISIS came on the scene. And the people, the civilians, are caught in the crossfire. They're caught in the middle of this unbelievably terrible conflict situation. And so the result has been one of the biggest humanitarian crises that the world has ever seen, certainly the worst refugee crisis since World War II. Right now there's over 7 million people internally displaced within the country of Syria itself, so Syrians who've left their homes for whatever reason, mostly because they've been bombed and their homes have been destroyed. And then even beyond that, there's over 4 million Syrians living in refugee situations, refugee camps mostly, in the surrounding countries around Syria, so like Turkey, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and so on, where they have fled and they're staying in mostly UN-led refugee camps, where they hopefully have a tent, but sometimes they don't. So these are deplorable conditions in the refugee camps. So over 4 million people. I mean, that's crazy. 4 million people living in refugee camps. The biggest refugee crisis that the modern world's ever seen. And thousands are trying to escape these refugee camps and to get to Europe so they can seek asylum there. And as we've seen in the news, a lot of people aren't making it as they do the journey across the Aegean Sea, for example. They're coming into Europe and they're coming up against fences, and they're not being welcomed. So it's a really terrible situation. Who are these Syrian people? Well, sometimes you see online and things, people will say, oh, 80% or 95% of these refugees are young adult males. And that's not even close to the truth. According to the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, the UNHCR, over 75% of the refugees are women and children. And over 50% are children specifically. So these are children. Think about this. I mean, I've got children myself. Think about these children who are in the situation. They have lost everything. They've, in many cases, lost their families. They've lost their homes. They've lost their schools, their education. They've lost their friends. They've lost their communities. Everything that they know, except their immediate family who's traveling with them, is gone. These children have seen terrible things. These children have seen people murdered in front of their eyes. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so that's the reality of what's going on in Syria right now. So what can we do to help? Well, the denomination that our church is a part of, it's called the Convention of Atlantic Baptist Churches. We're a group of over 450 Baptist churches all over Atlantic Canada. For decades, our denomination has been a government-recognized sponsorship agreement holder. What that means is we have a special relationship with Citizenship and Immigration Canada to bring refugees into Canada. And we've been doing that as a denomination at a rate of about 1 or 2 refugees a year on average. But then when this crisis started to become a reality, our denomination committed to bringing 50 refugees into Atlantic Canada from this crisis over the next year or so. And so that's actually been starting to happen. So many churches have responded to this that it looks like we're going to surpass the goal of 50 families very soon. But what got us interested was in August, the first church who organized a refugee response saw their family arrive in a little community called Paradise, Nova Scotia. And they arrived in Paradise, and this family, a mother and her 5 daughters from Iraq, were absolutely floored by what they witnessed upon arrival. There was a home ready for them, a fridge full of food, people ready to be their friends, and they just said, "This is literally paradise." I mean, it was incredible. And so we heard that story in August at our big convention meeting, and that highlighted the reality of the situation for me. So I came back to our church here, met with our leaders, and said, "Look, we need to do something." So we started talking about it. And then 2 weeks after that discussion, this picture was all over the news. A little boy, Alan Kurdi from Syria, 3-year-old boy, washed up dead on a beach and trying to get to Europe. Now, me, as a father, it shook me to the core, and I have, even myself, a 3-year-old son. And so I just was it totally affected me in a big way, as it did many, many people around the world. And it got things moving much faster here in Perth-Andover. So even though, I'm obviously deeply saddened by this picture, at the same time I'm deeply grateful for it, because it woke up the world to the reality of what's happening. These are children, just like my children, just like your children, your grandchildren, that are doing unbelievably crazy, difficult things for the sake of basic survival. So we have formed a group in Perth-Andover called the Perth-Andover and Area Refugee Support. Our goal of the Perth-Andover and Area Refugee Support is to bring at least one family of refugees, preferably from Syria or Iraq, because that's where the real situation is at the moment, bring them to Perth-Andover, resettle them in our community, and support them financially for 1 year. Now, this is not something that's unknown to us here. We did this before with a family of Vietnamese boat people in 1980, and I believe if we did it then, we can certainly do it now. So the approach we're taking is not just a church approach. We're deciding to take a community-wide approach to this for a couple reasons. One, we're a small church and we don't have a lot of money and a lot of resources to do this alone, so we thought we'd open this up to the whole community. But also there's such benefit in our community coming together. I think it's just going to be a blessing to our community as well, to work together, to bring churches together from all different stripes, people who aren't even involved in churches, just to come together and work together on a good, healthy, positive project for our community. So here's how it works. The program is called the Blended Visa Office Referred Program. There's different ways you can sponsor refugees to come into Canada. This is one way, and this is the way that our denomination is using. This is a really great method. This is a great system of doing it, because the candidates are already security screened. They're already security screened by the United Nations. So they're in the United Nations system, and then they're screened again by the Canadian government. So they're really, you don't have there's no concerns about terrorism and that sort of thing. And these people are high priority. I mean, these folks are given preference for sponsorship because their situation is so dire. The other nice thing about this program is that the government covers roughly half of the expenses. The approximate cost for us is going to be around $30,000. That's for a family of 5, and it looks like, we're not confirmed yet, but we'll be announcing very soon, it looks like we will be bringing a family of 5 to our community. And the cost to us is around $18,000. So the government's covering close to half of the associated expenses. That money, after they arrive, that pays their rent, it gets them a home, it pays their bills, provides clothing for them, all the things that they need for at least 1 year. Well, for 1 year, just 1 year. All the things they need for 1 year to get started on a new life in Canada. So, what does it mean beyond that to support them for a year? Like I said, a furnished home, but it also means language support. They're going to come speaking Arabic. They may have a little English or a little French, but probably not very much. So a big part of what we're going to do for that first year is help them learn the language, help them learn the culture, help them learn what it means to be a Canadian and to be involved in our country. So we need English language training for them. We need translation. Thankfully, I'm so very thankful, Dr. Zaki is in our community, he speaks Arabic. He's from Egypt originally, and he has agreed to be part of the team. He's been coming to the meetings. He's very involved, and so we're very thankful that he is going to be around to help us with translation and several other things. They're going to need help registering for school, registering for government services. One of the amazing things, too, is when they land in Canada, they land as permanent residents. So they have all the rights and privileges, with the exception of voting, that a Canadian citizen would have. So they don't need to go through a big, long immigration process. If they do want to become Canadian citizens, so they can vote, that's about a 4-year process where they have to demonstrate their English language proficiency. We may also want to provide them with transportation. Maybe not right off the bat, they won't have their license, but obviously Perth-Andover is the kind of place where you really do need a vehicle to get around. So we might want to provide that for them, help them find work, help them with basic things like friendship. I mean, these folks are going to come with knowing nobody, having lost everything. They just need friends. They need people who can help them and just, you know, basic things like friendship. So that's what it means to support them for 1 year. I'm sure there's other things as well. Now, why is this a good idea? When you go on Facebook and stuff, you'll see people saying some pretty, you know, you might even say racist sort of things about the situation and about the idea of bringing these folks to Canada. Well, I want to say, from a Christian perspective, I'm a Christian minister. It's basic. It's just so simple in my mind. It's just the right thing to do. When I read my Bible, I see the most basic commandments that Jesus gave, like in Luke chapter 6, where he said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." The golden rule. We learn it when we're kids, and it's so simple, it's so straightforward, but it's exactly the reality of this situation. There are people who, if it was us, we would be hoping that somebody in Canada would sponsor and bring us and give us a new life. And so we've got a responsibility to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Our mayor, Terry Ritchie, said at a public meeting when I was presenting this information, he said this, and I thought it was really profound. He said, "We gladly welcome the compassionate help of others when our basements were drowning," referring to 2012 and the flood. He said, "Then how can we not help them when their children are drowning?" And I thought, yeah, that's right. I mean, we have been the recipients of compassion and the recipients of generosity. I think we have a responsibility to give back to our world some of the generosity that we've received here in Perth-Andover. Jesus also said, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me," so the idea of welcoming strangers is taught by Christ as well. And in Luke chapter 10, we see the story of the Good Samaritan. And the story of the Good Samaritan is, again, so profound, because not only does this guy help it's a Samaritan man who helps a Jewish man who's injured and is going to die. Not only does he help him and provide for his needs, but there's also an interesting racial and religious tension in that story, because the Samaritan and the Jew were of different race, different language, different religion. And they were supposed to hate each other. And yet the Samaritan shows this incredible love, despite all those cultural differences, for the Jewish man. And then Jesus says this profound thing, this commandment. He says, "Go and do likewise." You, me, do exactly what this Samaritan has done. Even if it means reaching across racial divides, language divides, religious divides. That doesn't matter. Help people because they're human beings made in the image of God. So, in my opinion, it's just the right thing to do. It's so simple. If you think about what we're providing for this family, we're providing them safety where they have experienced far from anything close to that, peace, basic needs. They're hungry. I mean, there's all sorts of things they're struggling with. And opportunities. I mean, future. We give them a future. Right now, the average time that a group lives in a refugee situation, according to the United Nations, is 17 years. 17 years, if you get into a refugee camp, that it will take before you're resettled somewhere, well, resettled back to your country. So the chances of these folks getting back home anytime soon is next to nil. If they have kids, they're going to grow up in refugee camp. And so this is an opportunity to give them a future. Why else is it a good idea? We've got what we need here in Perth-Andover to provide for a family like this. We've got space, lots of space here. We have money. People say, money? I don't know, I think we're pretty poor. Well, I think we actually, when you compare our situation to most people in the world, we've got money. If you woke up this morning and turned a tap on in your house and running water came out that was clean, you are rich compared to most people in the world. And when I think about it too, I mean, you look at the Perth-Andover Fireman's Lotto, which, a great thing. We give, people in our community and surrounding areas, give to that every week around $11,000. So we've got money here, it's just a matter of the will and the desire to give it. So we've got money, we've got space, and we have resources. We've got a hospital, we have schools, we have government services here. We've got everything that a family needs to succeed here in Perth-Andover. Jobs, that's a little more scarce. We'll talk about that in a minute. Why else is it a good idea? Now, we're not doing this for our benefit primarily. We're doing it for the family. It's just simple humanitarian stuff that we're doing here. But it does benefit our community. Every study you'll read about revitalizing rural communities in Canada will tell you that one of the keys to the future of our rural communities is immigration. We have got to be more welcoming of immigrants. We've got to make our communities attractive to immigration. It's the only hope we have of really staying alive in this country where our population is aging and people are moving to the cities. And so this is just one little thing we can do, bring a family here who will be contributing to our economy. That being said, they come with not only thankful hearts, but they come with an incredible work ethic. Some people will say, oh, we don't want to bring them here because they'll be a burden on our government systems, or they're going to be a drain on our social systems, and we need to help our own people first. I've heard people say that. These folks are not coming as bums who will drain off of our system. These folks are coming as people who will do anything to provide for their family. A lot of these folks have walked halfway across a continent just to provide for their families, just to have safety for their families. They will go to great lengths to do just about anything that they need to do. And so they're not coming lazy or expecting handouts. These folks are coming ready to work. When the Vietnamese people came here, and the father, he was just absolutely desperate to work. He wanted to work and provide for his family. And so they come with an incredible work ethic. And beyond that, I mean, it's just going to be a blessing to know them. It's going to be a blessing to have a cross-cultural experience with them in our own community, and that enlarges our hearts as human beings. Now, there are some what-ifs that come up with this. People, some frequently asked questions. One of them is, what if they leave? Well, you know what? So be it. If they choose to leave, they can do that. They're free. They're human beings like us. They're not our pet refugees. If they come to our community and they find this place is not the right fit for us, or maybe they want to go somewhere where there's a Syrian community that they can be a part of in Canada, maybe there's family somewhere else in the country, maybe better job opportunities somewhere else, and they decide, thank you, but we want to go, we have to be okay with that. This is simply put, we have to be okay with that. The Vietnamese people who came in 1980, they left. After just over a year, they moved to Toronto. And they're doing really well in Toronto. And the people who helped them come to Perth-Andover have nothing negative to say about them moving away. It was a simple reality. And you and I would do the same thing if it was us, probably. And it was just a blessing to have them here for the time they were here. That being said, maybe they'll stay. They might not necessarily leave. We would love for them to stay. we'll do everything we can to make this a place where they say, yeah, we want to live here the rest of our lives because we're so thankful and we love it so much and there's such great opportunities. So that's what our goal. But if they leave, then they're free to do that. As a side note, if they do leave within the first 12 months, we're not obligated to continue to support them financially. Another question people say, what if they're Muslim? Well, in all likelihood they will be. There is a significant Christian population in Syria, but there's far more Muslims in Syria than there are Christians, because for the most part Christians have been so persecuted over the years that they've really fled and the numbers have dwindled a lot. So the Christian population there is very small. The most likely they'll be Muslims. And basically, to that I say ISIS, who's doing the bulk of the murdering right now, doesn't care if you're a Christian or a Muslim. They will kill you equally if you don't adhere to their particular extreme, radical, crazy brand of Islam. And so these are human beings in need of help. And just like the Good Samaritan story, whether they're Christians or Muslims or whatever, doesn't matter. They're human beings, and I have a responsibility to help them, and we all do. And then, finally, I've addressed this a little bit before, but what if they're terrorists? And the chances of this is so incredibly slim that I don't even really feel like I need to take the time to address this question because I think it's so foolish. But, I mean, the chance of them being terrorists is really next to nothing. These folks are going through very strict security screening. I was told at a meeting here the other day that it takes almost a year for them to go through the security screening process. They have to indicate every single address they've lived at for the last 10 years and every single activity that they were involved in. And if there's the slightest red flag in that process at all, then they're denied. And something like 50% of refugees are denied because of just even the most remote connection to the possibility of terrorism. No country wants to be the country that welcomes in refugees who turn out to be ISIS militants. And so the screening process is strict, and I don't think we have anything to worry about. And for the most part, these are families, women and children. I mean, they're escaping terrorism. They're not coming to bring terrorism. Okay, finally. Thank you for sticking with me here. I know it's been a long presentation. We need your help. We need your help. We can't do this alone. We've got a committee of about 8 to 10 people, and it's a strong team, but we need the community's help to make this reality. The first and easiest thing you can do is like us on Facebook. Just type in Perth-Andover and area refugee support, and you'll find our page. Like us, follow us, and stay informed as to what's going on. We would really appreciate that. One of the biggest things we need, probably the biggest thing, is we need money. I mean, the reality is it's going to cost us around $18,000. We've got some money that's already started to come, and we've applied for grants from various places. But we need your help. A whole bunch of people giving a little bit can go go really far. I mean, it'd be crazy. So you can send money to Perth-Andover and area refugee support, care of the Perth-Andover Baptist Church, 194 Barrett Street, Perth-Andover, New Brunswick, E7H1C8. And checks should be made payable to Perth-Andover Baptist Church, and we have a separate account set up just for this, that all the money will go into that. So that address, we'll post that on our Facebook page as well. Another thing you can do, and by the way, all donations are tax deductible, so we'll issue you a tax receipt at tax time, so make sure you send your mailing address with your donation so that we can issue a tax receipt. The other thing we need is, there's other ways you can give. We're going to need practical things. The family's going to need housing, furniture, clothing, possibly a vehicle. They're going to need people who can teach them English, friendship, local orientation. There's lots of things we need. If you have any leads on anything like this, or you've got ways that you can help us this way, please get a hold of me. And I would love to talk to you about how you can help. My phone number here at the church, 273-6691, 273-6691, or you can contact us through our Facebook page. Okay, so thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and thank you for considering how you can help us to save a family's life, literally save a family's life, and give them hope for the future.